Hey, welcome back to Restomod 101. Today we're working with Carli suspension and we're going to install a 4.5 Pintop off-road suspension kit on that thing. And when we come back, it's going to look like that thing.
Restomod 101.
All right, I'm here with Alex with ICS. Alex, what's ICS?
We do a light fabrication for off-road.
Cool, so he knows off-road, so he's the best guy to have here for this Carli installation. What's our first step?
Very first thing, we're gonna remove the brake lines because we're gonna drop the axle.
Cool.
So just remove that, separate the ABS line and bring it down. All right, so I'm disconnecting the ABS sensor from the brake line. We can free that up. I already took the, taking off the 10mm for the bracket. From the banjo bolt on the brake caliper. Make sure to save this bolt. The second step is you gotta disconnect this vacuum line from here so you can free up the bracket. There's an outlet for the vacuum line that's clipped into the bracket. Just got to unclip the clip to free the bracket. So once you're this far, you can let it finish draining so you can completely take it off. This is the connection between the brake line to the hard line. So we're taking off the brake line from the hard line. So you'll be needing a 13 for this. So this is our brake line from Carli. You gotta make sure when you install it, you can get your clip that's included in the kit, set it in. So I'm gonna be using a mallet to tap the clip in. Make sure you get that locked into place. So when you route the line, you wanna make sure you route it towards the front. So make sure this loops towards the front of the truck. We're gonna hold off on putting this bracket on until later, and you wanna just route through the factory location. So once you're here, you get your banjo bolt and you get your new crush washers. These are crush washers. Okay. So you want to put one right before you slide your bolt in. Go through the brake line and put the other one after the brake line. And then screw it in. You're going to be using a 15mm socket to tighten this down. So once you tighten this, just get it snug to crush the washer. Just took off the rear tires, now we're doing the back brake lines.
Alright, so right here I am removing the passenger side stock brake line. You're going to want to use a 13mm flare nut to break them free. You can also use an open end 13 after you get them broke loose. Also have a small pry bar just to remove these factory brake line retaining clips. Let me get the passenger side brake line, please. All right, so this end is gonna go up toward the top of the vehicle to the factory hard line. All right, guys, so we got a small little issue here. The factory brake line has a keyway on it. Carli one does not. So what we're going to do is just file down the bracket a little bit, and the new brake line should fit. And just like that, we're in. Okay, so we routed the line in the factory holding location, and then we will be dropping this index here, making sure that the brake line is turned to the passenger side, as this is the passenger side brake line. So now I am connecting the passenger side brake line into this new stainless steel Carli line, and then I will put down the locking clips. No crush washers, you will just be threading this directly into the Carli lines to the factory hard line. Alright, so using this mallet to punch in these clips. Alright guys, we just put all 4 mounting clips in, tightened down all the lines. We're going to go move to the front and install our radius arm drop bracket.
Welcome back to the front. The next step is to take the shock off. So in order to do that, we're supporting the axle on some jack stands. We're gonna remove this shock so that we can install the lower trailing arm bracket, which is gonna be over here. So we're gonna use a 21 socket on top and an 18 on the bottom. So we're breaking the top loose off now. Okay, you're good. All right guys, so now that it's broken loose, I'm gonna switch over to electric ratchet and just take the nut off. So now we're gonna go ahead and break the bottom bolt loose. We're gonna use an 18mm socket. So once you take off the bottom bolt, you should be able to remove the shock. And the next step is to remove the sway bar links. All right guys, so we're gonna remove the sway bar links. It's gonna be 18 for the top and the bottom. So now that I broke it free, it's easier with an electric ratchet. Okay, so now we're gonna counter hold the sway bar link with an 8mm socket. Once you remove the nut, flip up the sway bar and remove your link. We're gonna take the radius arm off. In order to do that, we're gonna take these two bolts off, 1, 2, by using the 15/16 socket. I'm taking these nuts off for the radius arm, and I'm gonna call Andrew for some help. So Andrew's gonna help me hold this radius arm so we can remove the last bolt and completely take it out of the truck. Now we're gonna take the bolts off and remove the radius arm. All right, so we got this one out, and now we're gonna put the passenger side radius drop bracket. All right guys, so you're gonna put the washer in through the back and then just bring in the bolt from the bottom. And once you get that in there, you're gonna put another washer through the top and finish it off with the nut. Then you're gonna slide these two with the washer first through the bolt and then through the bracket and the frame.
For the back bolts, we're using a 1 3/16 socket, which is going to be torqued down to 300 foot-pounds. And for the top, we're using a adjustable wrench.
All right guys, so once you get to this point, you're gonna have two bolts. There's gonna be an 18mm bolt that's gonna go towards the front and a 3/4 inch bolt that's gonna go towards the rear. And you're gonna torque both of these to 260 foot-pounds. You do the same thing for the driver's side. The next step is to install these two extension vacuum lines. There's gonna be one right underneath the oil pan near the oil filter, and there's gonna be another one on the driver's side by the differential vent tube. All right, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna remove the factory vacuum line, and simply what you can do is you can get some grease to make it easy on yourself, put it on the fitting so you can slide in the vacuum hose, and do the same thing on the factory vacuum hose. So just push it in and you can secure it back into place, just like that. All right guys, so we just finished up with the vacuum lines. The next step is to replace this track bar right here. All right guys, so I'm gonna use a 24mm socket to take off the passenger side of the track bar. You can give it a few taps, see if it comes off. This is not coming off, so we're gonna have to use a puller. So we're gonna use this puller to remove it. So just make sure to get it on a differential, watch out for the boot. And then once you clear both sides of the puller from the boot, you can go ahead and start tightening. So there you go, it popped off. Now we're gonna move on to the driver's side. Just free this side up and you can drop it down. All right guys, we're on the driver's side of the truck and we're gonna take this side of the track bar off. We're gonna use a 30mm wrench and socket. So just go ahead and grab the track bar, remove the bolt. So once you take the bolt off, if it doesn't come off easily, you might have to use a pry bar. But we're good on this side. So just take the track bar off. And now we'll go assemble the Carli track bar.
Man, you guys have been kicking ass. You got the radius arms out. Now what are we setting up here?
So we have the Carli track bar in a vise. We are going to set it up at 37 and 7/16 from hole to hole, right in the middle.
Okay.
That is going to be the length that Carli told us for the 4.5 inch.
Cool. Sounds good. Well, I got a chair waiting for me, so you guys get to it.
Where's my chair? Alright guys, so first thing you're going to get when you have your new Carli track bar, this Heim joint with lock jam nut is going to be inside here. You're going to want to pull it out, use some brake clean or some kind of dissolvent, and clean all the anti-seize off the bolt. That's only there for shipping. We're going to go ahead and put red Loctite on there as we torque it down. You want to go ahead and thread this in lightly. We are going to add some of the red Loctite on.
Now you don't want to put too much, but just enough. So what I'm doing, I'm putting just one line on 4 sides of this stud.
So the measurement we're looking for here is 37 and 7/16. It's actually going to be the hash mark right under 37 and 1/2. And you're actually going from the middle of the hole to the middle of the hole.
So once you get this into 37 and 7/16, you're going to want to tighten the jam nut.
And make sure, guys, that you are keeping your tape measure nice and straight. You don't want to follow the actual bend of the track bar. The main thing you want to make sure here with this Heim joint is that it is perpendicular to this side.
So you're going to use a 1 1/2 crow's foot.
On this end, I'm just using a adjustable wrench to keep it keep the alignment right while Alex torques it down.
And we're going to torque this down to 200 foot-pounds.
200 foot-pounds, just like that.
So let's double check. It's perpendicular. Yep. All right, guys, so once you torque everything down and make sure it's perpendicular on both ends, you're gonna go ahead and set this down. Depending on what lift you're going with, if you're going with a 4.5 inch lift, you're gonna use this spacer.
Hey, is that for the top or for the bottom?
This is for the lower.
Okay.
2.5 is this spacer, and you're gonna finish either one on the top with this one. So let me go ahead and get that in. So you're gonna put that in, and then you're gonna put the top one in. Make sure you clear the boot. So what I'm gonna use a small 90-degree pick to just put the boot around the spacer, so you can drop all the way in. Be careful not to poke a hole in it. So once you do that, you're good on the top. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this around to make it easier. And again, be careful not to poke a hole. So that's what the bottom side should look like. All right, so once you get both of these in, you gotta make sure the track bar is gonna tilt towards the right side. This goes towards the cab. So make sure you take note of that. And then for the next step, you're gonna have 2 of these spacers. There's a smaller one and a larger one. The larger one is gonna go towards the cab. So you're gonna put this back here, and the smaller one's gonna go to the front, the engine side. Slide that right in. Now we can go ahead and reinstall this. All right, guys, so we're gonna go ahead and reinstall the track bar. Andrew, you wanna hand me that?
Yes, sir, here you go.
So make sure not to drop the spacers. And we're gonna reuse the factory bolt for this. So just slide it in. Put the bolt in from the forward towards the rear. There we go. And reuse the factory nut. We're gonna go ahead and torque this down to 400 foot-pounds. All right guys, so once you guys get the driver's side installed, come over to the passenger side. So on this side, you're just gonna drop this in. If it doesn't go in smoothly, what we did, we raised the truck up about 2 more inches so we can drop in the joints. Once you do that, make sure it's seated properly. Get your hardware, put a washer, drop it through both spacers. Grab your second washer and your nut. This is a one-time use nut. And we're gonna torque down the track bar to 250 foot-pounds. I'm gonna have Andrew down there counter holding the nut as I tighten this down. There you go. Now we're gonna move on to replace the springs. So once you torque down the track bar, we're gonna proceed by replacing the springs. So we have already raised up the truck to free up the spring. Make sure you support the axle with jack stands from the bottom. Go ahead and remove it. All right, so once you get your spring out, you're gonna remove the factory isolator and you're gonna reuse it on the Carli spring. So before we install our new springs, we're gonna go ahead and add the Carli bump stop brackets. So let's go ahead and do that. So in order to remove the factory bump stop, just grab it and push it while twisting. It should come right off. There you go. Take the factory bracket off. You're gonna get your Carli bracket. Make sure the flat spot is facing outward. So go ahead and put the bolt in. So insert your 13mm screw and thread it into the frame. Okay, so remember, the flat side of the bracket is gonna face outward. So go ahead and hold it in place and tighten that. I'm gonna tighten it to 18 foot-pounds. So go ahead and tighten it, and then we're going to reinstall the factory bump stop, just like so. All right, so now that I have the Carli spring, if you have the 4.5 kit, the springs are gonna be directional. Passenger side is marked with the P, driver side is marked with a D. All right, so now we're gonna get your factory insulator, and line it up with the spring. Make sure to set that in. Now, before you do this, if you're gonna get reservoirs on your shocks, you're gonna go ahead and mount the bracket. Before you do this, you gotta make sure that the curved part of the bracket is facing up. All right, guys, so we're gonna raise the truck up just a little bit to fit the springs in. Andrew, go ahead. Okay, so we were going up and the axle started shifting just a tiny bit. So what Andrew did, he went inside the truck, turned the key on so he can unlock the steering. Go. So now that we got the springs in, we're gonna center them and just go back down. Go down very slowly. All right. We went ahead and pushed the axle a little bit further back as it was shifting when we were going up. So now that you get your spring in, make sure your reservoir bracket is facing outward. So now we're gonna continue on by installing the radius bracket and then finishing off by installing our shock.
Alright guys, we're going to get this radius arm installed.
Let me go ahead and help you. So you guys want to line up as many holes as you can. So let me go ahead and try to do this one. Alright guys, if it's a little tough to get in, you might need some extra hands. Sal, can you give us a hand?
Sure.
You want to go ahead and thread this bolt in. Alright, Andrew, hold it in place. I'm just going to give this a little tap. There you go. You got the hardware. Sal is putting in the hardware for the front of the radius arm, and then Andrew will be putting in the rear. So we're gonna shift this further back just a tiny bit. Back my way. Now we're going ahead and putting the bottom bolt for the radius arm. This might be a little tough, so you can go ahead and use a rubber mallet. You're good. So now you're gonna reuse your hardware. All right guys, so we installed the radius arm. We already went ahead and torqued it down. We did have to shift the axle as it did shift on us as we were going up. So now that we got that all set up, we're gonna go ahead and install the sway bar drop brackets and the sway bar extension links. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and take these 15s off. You got 2 on that side, already taking those off. I'm gonna take these 2 off here. Sal, can you hold the sway bar? Yes. So these go ahead and come off. So just set it down. We're gonna have to remove the factory studs from the frame. In order to do that, grab a small pick, go ahead and pull down on the tab so you can clear the frame and slide it backward at the same time. Okay, you got 1 and 2. You got these 2, take them off the frame. And then Carli supplies you with this bracket. You're gonna go ahead and fish this through the frame so that you can install the drop bracket. So you're gonna have 2 pins on this bracket. Make sure to center it to the frame. It should fit right in, giving you access to both threaded holes. So you're gonna bring this bracket, face the open-ended towards the cab. At the same time, grab your new hardware supplied from Carli so you can screw it into the bracket. Carli does recommend for you to tighten this by hand so you don't strip the supplied bracket. You want to make sure to squish the lock washer. Just like that. All right, so now that we snugged them down, you're gonna go ahead and torque them to 30 foot-pounds. Now let's go ahead and install our extended sway bar link. All right, so they come installed with both nuts, top and bottom, so go ahead and remove them before you install them. All right, so now you're gonna drop in the link to the factory location. You're gonna bring in the nut. All right, so you're gonna use a 17mm wrench and counter hold with the 8mm socket on top. Go ahead and snug this down and move over to the driver's side. So now that you installed the passenger and driver's side extended links, you're gonna go ahead and torque them both down to 30 foot-pounds. You're gonna get your supplied hardware once again. It's gonna be a 15mm bolt. Again, you wanna hand tight these before you screw them down. Once you tighten both of these down, you go ahead and torque it down to 30 foot-pounds. And then go ahead and install your link into your sway bar. Bring it down and go ahead and install the supplied nut. Throw it in by hand. And torque it down to 30 foot-pounds. So now do the same to the other side. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and torque down the track bar to 400 foot-pounds. Go ahead. All right, now we're gonna install the Carli tuned kink shock. We're gonna reuse your factory bolt for the bottom, and they supplied a new nut for the top. So go ahead and take the nut off, and you're gonna see 2 rubber bushings right here. Go ahead and split them. Okay, so you're gonna go ahead and leave the bigger one on the bottom. Then you're gonna guide your shock into the factory location. Install your top bushing. You're gonna grab this blue piece, put it on top of your top bushing. Try to push your shock all the way up. Grab your washer, comes with your shock. Put it on top as well, and then put your nut. You're gonna tighten this nut to 35 foot-pounds. So once you get that snug, you can go ahead. Okay, so what Andrew's gonna do now He's gonna try to push up on the shock so I can slide the factory bolt in.
We're gonna tap this into place a little bit.
And I'm gonna slide the bolt in. Make sure when you install this tab has to come towards the outside of the truck. And now we're gonna torque it to 100 foot-pounds. There you go. So now you're gonna tighten down the nut up top. Again, you're gonna torque it down to 35 foot-pounds. There you go. Unwrap your reservoir. Then you're gonna get your clamps. They come with your kit. Undo them completely. And then we're gonna go ahead and guide them through the mounting brackets. So that's the piece you installed before completely installing your spring. You don't wanna worry about the logo right now. You have to retorque everything after 500 miles. So once you make sure everything is okay, you can go ahead and reposition the reservoir so you can see the logo. You're more worried about not pinching the hose right now. Route them through the reservoir, mounting bracket, just like that. Grab your reservoir. Try to position it as best as possible, and install your clamp. Do the same thing with the other clamp. Route it over the reservoir into the mounting bracket and tighten it down. Once you snug down the back one, go ahead and position the front one so they look the same and tighten it down. Make sure it's good on there. So now the last thing left is to install the caster shim and bolt down your brake line brackets as well as the ABS line. All right, so we already tightened both of these clamps. We went ahead and tightened this brake line bracket as well as the ABS line. The next step is to remove this castle nut so we can install our new caster shim. So we're gonna go ahead and take this cotter pin off, unbend it, make sure you can slide it out. All right, so now we're gonna take the castle nut off. We're gonna use a 1 1/8 socket. So go ahead and undo this castle nut. Now, once you get to here, you wanna make sure to line up the top of the castle nut to the top of the ball joint. And we're gonna go ahead and grab a hammer. You can try tapping on the ball joint itself or on the knuckle. What we like to do is we get the socket so we don't damage the castle nut. We're gonna go ahead and tap on here. So as you can see, it already shifted. Try grabbing your pry bar and lift off the caster shim. So now go ahead and remove the castle nut and remove your caster shim. You might want to bang this just to loosen it up a little bit. Remove your shim. So we took the old caster shim off. The reason we're installing this new one is because once you race your truck up, the alignment is going to go out of spec. So with this, we're going to go back or really close into spec. You should still do an alignment afterwards. Now Carli recommends putting this slot facing the rear of the truck. So we're going to go ahead and do that. You're going to have to wiggle your knuckle to drop it into place. Again, make sure the slot on the shim is facing towards the rear. Okay, so once you get it there, you can grab your socket and you're gonna hit the shim until you hear a change of tone. Once you hear the difference, you're all the way in the bottom. Then you get your castle nut, you install it, and you're gonna torque it to 69 foot-pounds. Okay, so once you torque it down, make sure you can find the hole and tighten it until you line it up with the castle nut. We're using a new cotter pin here. Slide it through. So once you get that in, you want to get your pliers and spread open your cotter pin. you're all set. All right guys, the next step is to install the limit straps. Before you do this, you want to make sure you have your axle at full droop and supported with some jack stands. So you're going to go ahead, install the hardware on this hole on the radius arm. So go ahead and mock it up. You're going to go ahead, make sure it's parallel. Go ahead, put your hardware through. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna mark around the tab so I know where we're gonna grind so we can weld. Now that you mark that, go ahead and grind off the coating on the frame. All right, so I just finished grinding down the frame so we can get a nice clean surface. So what you wanna do next is get your limit strap and make sure it's fully stretched and parallel to your shock. You want to get your marker and mark the center of the hole. Measure 1.5 inches higher and make another mark. And again, make sure you're parallel. So grab your bracket and line up the hole to your second mark. And that's where it'll be going there. And then when you install this, you want to make sure this tab is facing down, because if you do weld it in upside down and you go off-roading, the force from the diff can actually pull this tab down. So just make sure you weld it in like this. All right, so on this 19 F250, we have this divot on the frame. You might have it too on yours, so when you're gonna go ahead and mark this, just make sure you properly seat this tab around the divot. Okay, so I'm tacking it on both sides to hold it in place, and now I'm going to start welding both sides. All right, so I already went ahead and cleaned off the metal with a little bit of acetone so we can go ahead and paint this. So let me cover this shock and let's go ahead and get this painted. So we're gonna go ahead and lower the truck so we can compress our spring and bolt in our limit strap. Andrew.
Yep.
Can you come down a bit?
Yep. Going down.
Go a little more. You're good right there. So you're gonna grab your bolt and nut and go ahead and install your limit strap through the front of your tab. And you wanna go ahead and counter hold the nut from the back and snug down your bolt. So once you go ahead and do that, you're gonna go ahead and torque it down to 35 foot-pounds. So I went ahead and I angled the limit strap a little bit to the right-hand side so that when I go ahead and tighten it and torque it down, it'll line up. There you go. So let's go ahead and do the other side. All right guys, before we mount our tires, we gotta bleed our brake system. So in order to do that, we're gonna take our brake reservoir cap off, and we have this brake fluid bleeder. So what you're gonna do is fill it up with brake fluid, clip it into your reservoir. So what this is gonna do is gonna make sure that your reservoir is full at all times while bleeding. There's a small valve down here. It's closed right now. Once you're ready, go ahead and open it, and it's gonna fill up the reservoir so you can bleed your brakes.
All right guys, just finished bleeding the rear brakes. Now we're at the front passenger here, still using our 3/8 wrench. I'm gonna go ahead and break this free, stick my bleeder nipple on. To know when you guys are done bleeding the brakes, you're just looking for a solid stream of brake fluid out of this clear hose here. And go ahead and start sucking all the air out of the system. All right, and from here we'll be using the 15mm socket to remove the frame side bolt. All right guys, and for the drag link side, we're gonna be using an 18mm socket. All right, if the steering stabilizer is a little stuck, you're just gonna hit the drag link a couple times with the mallet and it should come right out. Here is Carli's upgraded steering stabilizer, which is set at 200 PSI. We're gonna go ahead and install the frame side with these two gold washers provided by Carli and use the factory bolt. So to install the Carli steering stabilizer, it'll be a lot easier for you. That way you don't have to compress the spring all the way if you turn the wheel all the way to the left. This is gonna be torqued to 35 foot-pounds. Boom, 35 foot-pounds. Now we'll work on the drag link side. We're gonna apply a little bit of blue Loctite to the misalignment nut. Go ahead and install the Carli adapter. You only want to put this in hand tight for now, as we will be torquing it later. Now that we got that set in, we're gonna push this shock in to compress it. All right guys, now that we got that in, we're gonna go ahead and tighten this one down with a 3/4 socket to 30 foot-pounds. This one is a lock nut, so Loctite is not required. We're gonna use a 3/4 crow's foot to torque the bottom bolt of the misalignment nut. This is gonna be torqued to 30 foot-pounds also. And if you're not able to use a 3/4 crow's foot, feel free to use a 3/4 inch to go ahead and get that snugged up to about 30 foot-pounds. Good to go. So we're gonna start by removing the 5 lower bolts. By the way, this socket is gonna be a 9/16. You won't need to drain any of the fluid. The silicone gasket should hold all the fluid in there as we remove all these bolts. Gonna be loosening up our last one right now, and we'll get all these out. All right, I'm gonna start by getting the 2 upper bolts lined up and kind of set them in there, and then I'll torque it all down evenly. All right, so a deep well socket will access these bolts to get them all tightened up for you. All right, so I already got the driver's side secured. Now I'm doing the passenger, and then I'll work around and get them all torqued down. Now that I got all those started, I'll go ahead and torque them down evenly. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and set this torque wrench to 25 foot-pounds and get all these torqued down. And there you go. All right, so we got it all torqued down, and not only does this thing protect your differential from any rocks, it looks sweet.
All right guys, so we're on to the rear now. The truck is still on the lift. We're gonna go ahead and support the rear axle so we can replace the leaves, install the airbags, and replace the shocks. But next we're going to be removing our sway bar so we can get maximum travel when we do go off-road. So for that, we're gonna be using a 15mm socket. Take these 2 off. And then we'll be using a 13 for the bottom. All right, so Andrew's gonna go ahead and do a driver's side so we can completely remove the sway bar. We won't be needing this anymore. All right guys, we're gonna go ahead and remove these 2 retaining clips. So you gotta go ahead and come in with the flathead screwdriver so you can unlock the tab. Go ahead and slide up and come out through the frame. Same thing on the top one. Make sure not to drop it because it is a box frame, and you're good. We're gonna go ahead and lower the axle onto the jack stand so we can remove the leaves. Go ahead, Andrew. Keep going. And you're good. All right guys, in order to remove the leaf springs, we first have to remove the shock. So to do that, we're gonna be using an 18mm socket for the top, which is up here. And then you're gonna go ahead and grab a 21 with an 18mm wrench so you can counter hold the bottom. So go ahead. Then grab yourself a mallet so you can tap the bolt off. And you can remove the shock. All right, so grab yourself a deep 15/16 socket so you can remove the U-bolts. So go ahead and remove your U-bolts. Give it a little tap if you have to. Now we're gonna be doing one side at a time. So in order to help ourselves out, we're gonna go ahead and loosen the driver's side a little bit so we can install the new leaf spring. In order to do that, we already loosened up this block. We're gonna use a 30mm socket and a 32mm wrench to counter hold the nut. Now that we have that removed, we're going to use a 15/16 socket to remove the rear shackle. So you want to make sure that when you remove this, you remove it with the shackle. All right. So now I'm going to need some help. Andrew, can you go up a little bit? So when you go up, you want to make sure you don't stretch any cables or brake lines. So now go ahead and you're gonna clear the shackle on the rear and help me pull it out.
Lift it up, I'll remove the shackle.
You're gonna have to go up.
All right guys, so we'll be removing the shackle now to transfer it over to the new leaf springs. Keep in mind the orientation. This one goes from the frame out. All right guys, so we got our shackle. We're putting it on our new leaf springs. Putting the bolt the same way it was before. Make sure you clean off all the grease that comes through because we'll be applying some red Loctite in a bit. Make sure for now you only put this in hand tight and then we'll torque it down once we've got it all set.
What we're trying to do right now is we're trying to place the leaf within the brackets. So go over the rear bracket, go all the way over. Let me get this side in. Okay, so we got the front side in. Now we gotta make sure that this bolt goes on the hole that's in the axle. So it's centered. There you go. Now make sure the shackle goes into the rear bracket. We're trying to get these bolts in here. I gotta go up just a little bit. Get the nut. Okay. So we gotta try to center this nut into the axle and get the rear shackle in at the same time. So we can rack it up a little bit, raise it up. So what I'm trying to do now is push the shackle down a bit so we can slide the bolt through, just like that. Make sure to get your nut from the rear over here. So once you get this in, you got to worry about centering the leaf on the diff. So go ahead and screw that in, just like that. In order for us to close the gap between the leaf and the differential, we're going to go ahead and lower the truck and you're going to watch this sit in. Robert, can you go down a bit? Keep going. Keep going. Right there, you're good.
All right guys, so we have the factory upper U-bolt plate here in the vise. We're gonna bore out the centering hole to keep it centered on the Carli leaf springs. That should do it.
All right, so now that Andrew drilled the hole, we're gonna go ahead and make sure it fits over our leaf spring. So now you see it fits perfectly. We're gonna go ahead and drop in our U-bolts and you're gonna hand tight these so that we can move over to the driver's side. You want to go ahead and grab your washer first and then install your nut. Remember, leave these hand tight because you still got to do the driver's side. All right guys, so once you get to the driver's side, in order for you to remove the bolt for the leaf spring towards the front of the truck, you have two options. You can either drop down the gas tank or you could cut the bolt head off and replace it with a new bolt that you cut 1 inch shorter. So in order for us not to drop the gas tank, we're gonna go ahead and just cut the head off and insert a new bolt that we already cut 1 inch shorter. There you go.
right, guys, back here at the rear, almost done. We're gonna remove this factory bump stop and install our extra long travel airbags.
You're gonna need a 15mm socket to remove the nuts. Drop down the bracket. And then grab a small screwdriver, flathead, unclip the clip from the frame and slide it out. We got one going towards the back and another one coming towards the front. There you go. Then you have this bracket supplied by Carli. You have to make sure that you put it dowels facing up. You're gonna have a cutout that's gonna fit exactly within the frame. So you gotta make sure, put it in and carefully guide it towards the rear. It'll be somewhat flush to the frame. Then you can go on and install your plate. You're gonna have 3 different sets of screws. You're gonna have 4 small ones that'll hold the airbag in place. You're gonna have 4 medium ones which will hold the bracket to the frame. And then you're gonna have these long ones that'll actually go through the frame and onto your bracket. So you wanna go ahead and thread the medium-sized bolts first. Being careful not to push up on the bracket that you just installed inside the frame. Get your rear one into place. Again, you can easily shift the bracket, so make sure you're careful. Grab your 2 bolts. Make sure you put a washer before you push them through the frame. So go ahead and slide them in through the frame, line it up with the bracket. You might have to wiggle it just a bit. All right, so once you guys remove the clip, make sure before you completely install your bracket, there's a sensor that you gotta move out of the frame to clear the bracket before you tighten your 2 large bolts. So we already went ahead and did that. Now we're gonna put our washers and our nuts. So once you get that in there, you wanna make sure that you torque these 2 bottom bolts before you do the large bolts. You're gonna use 15 and go ahead and torque them down to 35 foot-pounds. So once you get to this step, make sure to get a blade to help you because you're gonna need somebody to counter hold for you. This is gonna be a 15/16 and you're gonna torque these to 230 foot-pounds. The next step is to grab your 90-degree fitting. You're gonna have 1 threaded side and 1 push lock side. Put some Teflon on this air fitting. Then grab your 3/8 wrench. Go ahead and snug it down. Be careful not to over tighten it because it's just aluminum. Okay, so once you go ahead and get your elbow with some Teflon, you're gonna put it into your airbag and make sure that it's pointing up. And before you slide this into your bracket, you're gonna put the fitting towards the front of the truck. You're gonna get your heat shield, put it over the airbag. You're gonna grab your small bolts with your lock washer and then your regular flat washer. So you're gonna grab your heat shield, point it towards your exhaust, drop in your bolt. Andrew, can you give me a hand?
Yep.
Can you hold this airbag for me real quick? Let me slide this bolt to watch the heat shield. Start threading your bolt. Leave it loose. You're good. That's fine. Okay, so you're gonna go ahead and leave that in there loosely. Then you're going to drop down your bag so you can see where you're gonna bolt this to your differential. Pull this down slowly. All right guys, so before you put this mount into your differential, you wanna go ahead and slide your bolt through the hole and thread it onto your airbag. Can you give me a hand, Andrew? So once you get that in there hand tight, you're gonna go ahead and torque it down to 35 foot-pounds. There you go. So then go ahead and lay your lower bracket onto your differential and bring in your U-bolt. Remove your nuts. U-bolt is gonna come in from the bottom towards the top. Get your bottom bracket in here and slide your U-bolt in. And again, you wanna leave these hand tight. You wanna bring the shock so we can torque everything. All right guys, so now that we got everything loosely installed, we're gonna go ahead and install our shock. You're gonna have a wider spacer on this side and just a bushing on this side. Your thicker spacer is gonna go towards your frame to give enough space for your shock to clear the chassis. And you're gonna wanna put your fitting towards the inside. If you have a 2017 or newer truck, you're gonna go ahead and remove the reducer, which is in here. So go ahead and take that off. Now we're gonna slide the shock in. Again, remember the fitting's gonna go towards the inside. Go ahead and bring this in. Don't forget to put the thicker spacer towards the frame. Go ahead and slide it onto your stud. Over here. Grab your factory 18mm nut. Screw it on. And then grab your factory lower bolt and nut. Go ahead and slide it through to install your shock. You might need to lower the truck a little bit. Robert, can you go down just a bit? Go ahead and move your reservoir over your exhaust. Again, it's an 18. Then you're gonna torque your nut on top to 35 foot-pounds. Remember, your fitting goes towards the inside. There you go. All right, guys, so once you get to this lower bolt, you're gonna go ahead and torque this to 100 foot-pounds. You're gonna need an 18 and a 21. There you go. So now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna torque all these bolts down, and then we're gonna mount our reservoir.
All right, guys, so before we can torque any of these bolts down, we need to drop all of the weight of the truck onto the jack stands. Can you guys lower it down for me? All right, guys, so we got the last bolt torqued all the U-bolts to 110 in a crisscross pattern. Then we went to the front leaf spring bolt. That one gets torqued to 400 foot-pounds. Don't forget your red Loctite. And then the two rear shackle bolts are both gonna be 180 with red Loctite. We're gonna slap the wheels on it, drop it down, and re-torque everything.
In order to install our shock reservoir, Carli gives you these brackets and two self-tapping screws. We're gonna go mark the bed. We're gonna go ahead and drill these holes, mount the bracket on there, and then use the clamps to secure the reservoir. So let me go ahead and do that. You're gonna position your reservoir with your bracket. Center it, make sure you're not too high to hit the bed or low enough to hit your tank. So once you're here, make sure you try to center the bracket to the reservoir. Again, giving yourself some slack. Go ahead and grab your marker and mark your holes. You're gonna use a 10mm socket for this. Go to your mark and drill. So once you get through your first mark, go ahead and go to your second mark and drill. And take your bolts off, grab your bracket. Make sure not to over tighten this because you will strip your bed. So go ahead and undo your clamps. So go ahead, slide your clamps through your reservoir and into your bracket and tighten them down. Make sure to grab your bracket from the back. It could be a little hard to see over the gas tank, and tighten it down. There you go. You want to make sure it's on there. All right, so we got that done.
All right, we just wrapped up installing the Carli Suspension 4.5 Pintop off-road suspension kit. Andrew, this truck looks badass. What all did we add to it?
We did the radius arm drop brackets, we did the radius arms, we did the track bar, leaf springs, airbags, brake lines, a couple other things.
And then we decked it out with some big tires and some beautiful fuel wheels. Man, those things look mean and tough. Now what's left? Because we have a couple things we got to do before we can actually put this thing to use.
So we're going to take it for a quick test drive, make sure everything is set right and not making any noises or anything like that. Then we're going to take it to an alignment shop, and then retorque everything after 500 miles. And then we'll take this thing off-roading.
Okay guys, so remember, 3 things you gotta do. 1, go for a safety ride. Make sure nothing's rattling loose. 2, take it to an alignment shop. Because we've messed with the suspension and the steering, you're gonna need to get your truck realigned. And then 3, you need to retorque everything to the specs that were specified. But Andrew, you said off-roading, you live in LA. Where are you gonna go? What?
405 traffic.
Okay.
Restomod 101.